Welcome back to our channel. Peaches had always been underestimated, moving quietly in the shadows of the grand lives that unfolded around her. But when the storm of her revelation finally broke, it shattered every fragile bond in ways no one could have predicted. The evening had begun with subtle tension, a gathering that was meant to be just another night of forced civility. But beneath the surface, there were already invisible fractures running through every connection in the room. When Peaches rose and let the truth spill from her lips, the silence that followed was almost unbearable. For years, people had speculated about her role, about what she truly knew, but no one had ever imagined that she was the keeper of a secret so explosive. In one breath, she dismantled the fragile web of lies and illusions by announcing that Leslie and Hayley, who had built their lives on mutual resentment and deep-rooted hostility, were not just enemies bound by bitterness, but blood relatives, sisters torn apart in infancy and hidden from each other by those who feared the consequences of their bond. The impact was immediate and devastating. Every gaze turned sharply toward Leslie, whose cold exterior was always her shield, and Hayley, who had worn her defiance like armor for so long. Both women had built identities defined by conflict, their battles etched into every memory of those who knew them. To learn that all along the war they had been fighting was against someone who shared the same blood, the same history concealed in shadows, was not just painful but utterly destabilizing. The room seemed to collapse inward, as if air itself had been stolen away. No one dared to move. The ripple spread beyond the two women themselves, infecting everyone connected to them. Relationships that had once been stable now quaked on the verge of collapse. Friendships fractured, loyalties dissolved, and every person who had invested themselves in either Leslie or Hayley's battles was suddenly forced to question their own place in this tangled, merciless web. For Leslie, the revelation struck at her core. She had lived her entire adult life sharpening herself into someone untouchable, someone who thrived on control and discipline. Yet Peaches had torn open the foundation beneath her. Her memories, the identity she had clung to, the battles she had fought, all were rewritten in an instant. Every cruel word exchanged with Hayley, every scheme to outmaneuver her rival, was now drenched in irony and horror, because those battles had never been against a stranger. They were against a sister she had been denied the chance to love, a sister she had unknowingly betrayed. Rage and disbelief clashed within her, twisting her face with emotions she could not contain, because the enemy she despised most had just become family. Hayley, on the other hand, spiraled into devastation. She had built her narrative around the pain of rejection, the constant sense of being the outsider, the fighter who clawed her way into power through defiance. Knowing that Leslie, who had often been the embodiment of everything she hated, was her own blood felt like the cruelest betrayal of fate. Every slight, every humiliation, every scar carried new weight. The battles she had fought suddenly became battles against herself, because in Leslie she saw not just her rival, but a reflection of what she might have been if life had not stolen her away and buried her truth under layers of deceit. The hatred did not vanish with the revelation, it only grew darker, transforming into something more destructive. Because now it was no longer simply hatred, it was wounded love denied, twisted into vengeance by time and lies. Around them, the family and their circle were stunned into chaos. Anita, who had always prided herself on being the matriarch who kept order, could feel the collapse of her authority as whispers began to rise. The others, shocked and disoriented, began to demand answers that no one was ready to give. Vernon, who had always carried secrets of his own, went pale at the implication of what Peaches had revealed. He knew more than he had ever admitted, but this truth, dragged out into the open with such violence, threatened to expose even the pieces of his past that he had locked away in silence. Martin, already weighed down by his own battles, looked at Leslie and Hayley with a sense of foreboding, knowing that the revelation would not bring them closer but tear them and everyone else further apart. Peaches, standing amidst the storm she had unleashed, showed no regret. She had bided her time for years, waiting for the perfect moment to let the truth explode, and when she chose this night, she knew it would destroy everything. Her satisfaction was not hidden. For too long, she had been treated as inconsequential, as though she were just another voice drowned out by louder personalities. But now, she had forced every eye to turn toward her, and every life to be altered by what she knew. The revelation was not just a fact, it was a weapon. It dismantled alliances and forced enemies into bonds they despised, bonds that would poison every relationship from this moment forward. The fallout was immediate. Leslie withdrew into a cold, trembling silence, her mind racing through years of interactions with Hayley, realizing that every word, every wound, was now part of a cruel family tragedy. Hayley lashed out in destructive energy, knocking over glasses, storming from one corner of the room to another, her fury uncontainable as she demanded to know why the truth had been buried for so long. Friends tried to intervene, but no one could touch the raw violence of emotions tearing through her. What had once been rivalry rooted in hatred was now contaminated by betrayal so personal it could not be explained. The consequences began to spread outward. Naomi, Hayley's closest confidant, felt betrayed for not knowing the truth herself, and her trust in Hayley fractured in the process. Dani, who had always taken sides in the battle, now found herself lost in a labyrinth of divided loyalties. To support Hayley was to stand against Leslie, but to embrace Leslie was to betray Hayley, and now that they were sisters, the decision carried implications far deeper than mere friendship or rivalry. Andre, already battling his own demons, looked on in silence, understanding that this was not just a revelation but the start of a war no one could control. The gossip spread like wildfire. Within hours, the entire community was buzzing with the knowledge that Leslie and Hayley were sisters. Speculation filled every corner. Who knew, who had hidden it, and what it meant for the future of the Dupree legacy? Old alliances began to crumble as people chose sides, not based on principle but on self-preservation. Business partners withdrew from deals, afraid of being caught in the fallout. Political aspirations that had been carefully cultivated within the family began to rot as the scandal tainted their public image. Every secret meeting, every quiet arrangement, now carried the risk of collapse. Yet the greatest danger lay not in the scandal itself but in the two women at the center of it. Leslie, driven by the need to maintain control, began plotting her response, knowing that weakness would invite destruction. She would not allow Hayley to weaponize their newfound bond against her. She would uncover every hidden truth, dissect every lie, and use the knowledge to her advantage. Hayley, however, fueled by fury and heartbreak, vowed silently that she would not be the victim of this revelation. She would expose everyone who had kept the truth from her, punish every hand that had manipulated her life, and force the world to reckon with the pain she had been forced to endure. The tragedy of the revelation was that it did not unite them. Instead, it deepened the divide, turning their war into something blood-soaked and inevitable. Sisterhood should have been a bridge, but in their world, it was a weapon. Every smile between them now dripped with venom, every silence carried the weight of unresolved betrayal, and every encounter threatened to explode into violence. They were no longer merely rivals in society's games, they were sisters bound by blood and chained by rage. And in that truth lay the promise of destruction that would reach far beyond them, consuming everyone in their orbit.